Welcome back. We continue with our conversation about the Clicks Tresemme racism scandal. Corporate racism is what we're speaking about. I'm joined by the diversity trainer, Terry Oakley-Smith. Sinovuyo Mondliwa is a natural hair content creator. Fasia Hassan is a Manangas member of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, also was part of that group that led the Fees Must Fall protest. I want to come to you, Sinovuyo, as a young black woman who is a hair and beauty influencer, but you also choose to wear your hair in its natural state. I want to get from you a sense of whether attitudes are changing to the natural hair of black women and how that is perhaps holding you back professionally and personally.
So I often get the question when people will be like, what do you do? So they'll look at my Instagram and my YouTube and they'll be like, what do you do? It's not obvious. And I'll say to them, no, I just show my followers that I can wear my natural hair out every single day for 365 days or whatever a year, and it's okay. So I like that it's not like something that you can pinpoint and say, I make art. It's because it's not, people aren't used to someone who just wears their natural hair out every single day and advocates for its beauty. And what you were talking about earlier, you were saying you wanted me to speak about my experience when, like, in the space and trying to make money. So I have partnered up with a lot of brands, and some brands are local black women making their own products, and some brands are big brands such as your Unilevers and all of that. And I also feel that uncomfortableness. It's not only from white people in those spaces who can't speak about blackness and can't speak about racism. I sometimes also feel uncomfortable where I'm like, why are you guys just tweaking the status quo? I want you to address the fact that black hair has been historically underserved by producing a product that is for our hair type. Don't just add now to existing products and add, let's say, shea butter and then say, for all hair types. I have actively had these uncomfortable conversations, and it's met with, oh, that's interesting, we'll think about that, but nothing ever happens. So there is a change, and there are people willing to work with me more and more. I'm getting more work, but there's no real change. I feel like there's tweaking and there's like being politically correct, but it's not coming through enough. I've been doing this for 4 years, and still it's just not enough.
Let me ask you this then, Sinovuyo. Do you think the fact that you are not an employee, for example, of a corporate entity makes it easier for you to call out some of what's going on as far as racism and the many other forms of bias against black women in particular?
No, definitely. I think it's even better now because I've started my own brand and my primary source of income is no longer brand work. So I can turn down, I was saying last week to my friend, I'm so happy that I can actually turn down work where I feel like I'm not being the brand itself doesn't represent my brand enough. So it's not just me now feeling grateful when a brand wants to work with me. I need to test it. I need to see if that brand represents blackness enough for me to work with it. So I do feel that I've got more room to be more honest, and the financial dependency aspect decreasing also helps, but definitely I'm still not, it's still not easy, but I mean, it is easier. I used to be in corporate, and even like going to work in those kind of spaces, they'd say, oh, Sino, you're just like they wouldn't understand what my plight is. So now that I'm free of that, those spaces, I work from home, I feel more like in tune and more confident about what I do than being in those spaces where it's played down. Like, oh, you just talk about hair. It's not just hair.
And Terry, as a diversity trainer, then you don't go into these environments where we know, sadly, the reality for many young black people in these spaces is that they cannot speak as freely and call out racism. I want us to drill down to the reasons why it's not as easy as standing up and saying, hold on, Terry, the CEO, this here is racist, and I don't think we should go ahead with it.
There's two things to mention here, Tembekile. The one is that although I listen to and I agree absolutely with what Sino said about the need for black people to call out racism, quite frankly, it's time that white people understood it and began to call it out too. Because unless we begin to work as white allies with black people, situations are not going to change. And then the other thing, I think one of the reasons, obviously not for all black people, but very often if one is young in an organization, new in an organization, there's something called internalized oppression at work, where as a young person who's black, You don't want to be seen to be speaking out against your white boss, for example, or not seeming to be in line with your colleagues who might also be white. And I think it's very difficult to address internalized oppression. And I think you need very skilled Black facilitators to be able to work with that. And it's very important, I think, in addressing racism that white and Black people work together. And that's indeed what we do in diversity. So those two issues, pull it out.
Sorry, Terry. Fasiya, on working together, I recall when the Fees Must Fall movement began, right? There was conversation about intersectionality. You also spoke about the differences in terms of class and race. But when one speaks a lot more to younger people in their 20s, in their 30s, especially with the flare-ups in South Africa's racial tension, people say, I'm shocked that Fasiya, that I went to school with, or went to university with, also harbors views that reflect a middle-aged white man who grew up in apartheid South Africa, and you wonder if our generation is then going to have to deal with the same issues for decades on end.
Well, I think the bitter truth is that if we don't address these things now and we don't address them meaningfully, that's going to be the case, because this is not one of those things that we can put a bandage over and think, oh wow, we've done it, we've solved the crisis of racism, you know. And that's what I was writing down now, that I think it's important that there are people who can speak out. Myself, Vuyo, Terry, etc. We're right here on this panel. Let's utilize this, but also very cognizant of the fact that there are other people who cannot. So what tools, what strategies, what tactics can we use to continue this fight beyond just the current clicks debacle, and hold private sector in particular more accountable? Because the one thing is, in public, or in the public sector, it's very open. People see you all the time, right? But with the private sector, they seem to think that they can get away with murder. And that's something that we need to look at. So I really think stuff like shareholder activism, discussions around boycotts, having more inclusive marketing campaigns where we say we are not represented, and then we just stop, right? We say, well, clicks, until you get your act together, we're not going to support the business, for example. You know, we need to be a little bit more tactical than where we are being now. And I think we've also seen that in the last, 2 or 3 days with the EFF, who have been, harming or harassing, for example, the cashier at Clicks. It's not their fault, right? We need to hit them where it hurts. And that's why I'm thinking that we need to think beyond just this one incident and into something that's far more structural and far more long-term as a solution. Otherwise, Timothy, we're going to, for the next 10, 20 years, keep having these discussions. And I don't know about you, but I can't. I cannot continuously have to go through this.
And Vuyo, it is a common exhaustion among Black people who say it becomes exhausting to every day have to defend your humanity, your appearance at the most basic level. But Fasiya also speaks to the issue of long-term structural change, right? And when you look at a brand such as Clicks, it operates in a rather monopolistic business environment, in that often what they sell and what they would, for example, get from suppliers such as yourself is not that easy to get placed in other stores. So what is that long-term sustainable approach to deconstructing not only the issue of racism, but the monopolistic elements to the way the economy functions?
Okay, I'll speak firstly to the part about the monopoly. I feel that e-commerce has really freed me and other people that I know that I work with in the natural hair space. With shutdown has been a big catalyst in fast-tracking how South Africans use online purchasing services, right? So I think lots of Black women are capable of creating products that are well formulated that they can sell on their websites. I think Black women should go on YouTube and consult people and find out how to open their own websites and sell their own products. So I think that will force shops like Clicks and others that are similar to do more and to actually do what they've supposed to have been doing for years. So I think us taking our buying power and going to buy products from online shops owned by Black women who create the products for Black hair is very important.
Terry, come back to you. Click says, well, don't leave us, we're going to do better. The CEO saying transformation is a top priority for the group. But the reality in South Africa is that a lot of businesses are more reactive than proactive, in that they often tackle the issue once there's been a scandal. I'm wondering, in your experience, about the long-term handling of transformation as a project in businesses, whether it lasts beyond the moment of scandal?
Very disappointing, in fact, Tembekile. Very few organizations do. Because if you really want to make a difference and embed an anti-racist approach in all of your employees, it actually takes, first of all, it's going to take time. And companies must be prepared to set aside the time. All too often it's, call in a charismatic speaker and have him or her give a speech, and now we've done it. Whereas it's something that, first of all, needs to be investigated. There needs to be a process of actually looking at the culture. How is racism manifesting in this particular company? Because all companies are different. And then having actually looked at how it's manifesting, then interventions need to be developed for that company, not off-the-shelf products brought in from America. And I really like what Sina was saying about her products there. But products that are developed for South Africans by South Africans. And like Sino, I've had to reinvent myself during the lockdown and develop product around diversity and racism, which is specifically for our market and which can be done online. So I think also, but perhaps one of the key things is how it's led. So obviously there needs to be a budget for it, and it can't be a sort of, oh, well, it's a nice to have, and, we'll just sort of cut corners here and there. The leadership of the organization must commit. They must be seen to walk the talk. They must themselves become white allies. And you can't just declare yourself a white ally. It's something that has to be earned. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of a process to deal with anti-racism, interventions that deal with it, and then leadership actually driving it. And having in place a sustainable process that can carry on. Otherwise, I'm afraid, and I was smiling when Sina was talking about her 4 years of developing product for black hair. And I was thinking about my 20 years of trying to make a change in organizational cultures. It's hard work, it's unforgiving work, but it's work that we have to keep doing.
You mentioned allyship. Fasia, let me take that and bring it to you, because whenever these conversations happen, you do have white people who say, well, I am not racist and I would really like to be part of the fight against racism. I just don't know how. What is allyship that especially does not then become louder than the voices of the people who are on the receiving end of the abuse?
Exactly. So I think the first thing that's very important is you must always be led by the disenfranchised or marginalized groups who are particularly oppressed. So it's not something where you can come and say, oh, let's do this. It's quite the opposite. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. But more importantly, I'm here to say, well, whatever privilege or voice or access that I have, whether it be social capital, actual capital, even political capital, right? What can we do in the spaces that we're in to change that? And it's a very interesting thing, this Clicks debacle, because I actually straighten my hair. And in my whole process, reading about Biko and this political awakening, I have to sit back and ask myself the same question that we are now asking. Why do I feel this need and this pressure? And that's what I think we need to be a takeaway from this, right? It needs to be beyond the intangible, right? We need to have actual tools. I've mentioned some stuff earlier on. But I think even just as citizens, as people, we're doing the right thing by completely being horrified and calling it out. But like I said, we need to be a little bit more sustainable and a little bit more long-term, so that 2 or 3 months from now, we can come back to the conversation with the CEO of Clicks and say, what have you meaningfully done to change the status quo? And what, more importantly, have you meaningfully done to support black women in the SMME business that Sinovuyo has mentioned as well? So for me, it's like multi-pronged. And like I said, allyship, you will always be led. And also the last thing on this point, you're not always going to get it right. And there are moments where you're going to have to acknowledge your privilege, take a step back, apologize where necessary. And that's part of the process, right? The part of the process of redress is not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be comfortable, but it is necessary.
Sino, again, you are among us the one business person who's in this space who experiences this both personally and professionally. Are there a lot of allies in the industry as things stand?
I got a call at 8 p.m. on Friday from Theresa May, and they obviously what I could say on social media could potentially be damaging for them regarding my following, right? So they're like, please tell us what we can do, all of that. I said, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I will get back to you. I sent an email at 00:54, basically 1 a.m., and I sent a long email and I had suggestions. The next morning we wake up, we got onto a call, and I said to them, this is what I'm suggesting. I think you should do this. We need a roundtable, a public roundtable. You need to speak to people that have been speaking about natural hair, black faces, black women. I know a few of them. If you need references, let's do this. And there was that lack of willingness, because there was, we are planning something like that for later, but we're going to involve all the brands. But right now, like us personally, we can't do it right now. And I was like, no, you have to. You as this specific brand, because now your name has come out, you have to actively, loudly do something. I said, please, don't, like, I respect you guys, and don't take this moment and let it slide, like, and let it sort of like fall into the background. I said, you need to be loud about it. You need to be public about it. You need to consult. Do it. And they said they'd call me Monday or Tuesday. They haven't called me yet. So there's an unwillingness, but let's hear what you have to say. So I'm hoping that this might be the time that eventually the partnerships become stronger and more real. But right now it's still that begging together, but nothing gets done.
Fasia, you're a politician. You're in the Gauteng legislature. Do you think that enough is being done at that level? Because a lot of the criticism has been that in South Africa, we pass legislation, but it is bringing the legislation to life that is lacking.
Exactly. In many ways, we have very good policies, very good acts, etc. Although on this issue, I think there's still a lot to be left wanted. But you're quite right in acknowledging that implementation is a big problem. And for some time, I've been saying that we can't allow the private sector to just operate anyhow, especially not in a country like our own, especially not in a space where our people have been historically and currently remain oppressed and remain unable to come to the economic table, for example. I do think that it requires more bold policy decision making. I do think that we need to start saying, well, if you're going to engage in these businesses, we need to see meaningfully how you're supporting black business. And we need to see that there are punitive measures when things like this happen. So that's one thing. But I also do believe, and I have to agree with you, that our implementation level is not that great. And this is also another example of it. But like Sinovuyo said, and I agree with this, that it can't just be politicians at the table who are making the decisions. We need to involve our communities. We need to do this together. Otherwise, we will be as guilty, maybe not on the racism element, but as guilty as Clicks and Tresemme, who are just ignoring and muting fundamentally important voices. So it's a bit of a combination of the two, but in fact, it is something that I was planning on raising in caucus this week. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow, so that's something I also plan on raising there.
Fasia San, Sinovuyo Mondliwa, Terry Oakley-Smith, thank you all for that conversation this afternoon.